There are a lot of things that I wish that I knew in my 20s, and a lot of things that, for my own peace, I wish that I practiced. And I think that even though the 20s for me were a place of discovery and personal development, because I started to really read books and do those sort of things, personal development, go to seminars around age 25. And it was pivotal for me because it was something that I knew that I needed in my life. I had reached a point where I was suffering from chronic anxiety and panic attacks. And because of those panic attacks, I knew I needed to make a change in my diet. I knew I needed to make a change in my everyday life and conversations, the people I associated with. And so there's a handful of things that I kind of took away from that time. And I want to share those with you about your 20s. 20s is a weird stage of life. You're not in high school no more. If you went to college, you're not in college. Well, you may be in college in your early 20s, but you're kind of coming out of that time. And you're faced with the real world. You're faced with real obstacles. All of a sudden you're working and you got a job and you got to maintain bills, and depending if you got yourself in debt, you got payments you got to make, all these things, and possibly even having kids at that point. I got married at 18 years old, so it was something that was definitely real in my life. And so because of that, I had to really buckle down and become a responsible young man. Change my hands here. I had to become a responsible young man, even when I wasn't ready for it. So in my 20s, I wish I would have recognized that I didn't have as much wisdom as maybe I thought I did. You're full of testosterone at that point as a man. You're full of pride. You're full of, you just want to take on the world. You just want to prove people wrong. You just want to do your own thing. You don't want to be held down by limitations or what other people think. And because of that, sometimes you overlook things that you shouldn't. You overlook principles and wisdom. You overlook things that seem old or outdated. You think that, that might have been great then, but it's not great now. And it's not the same. We don't live in the same world. We don't live in the same time. Things are different now. But the problem with that thinking is that principles don't go out of style. Values don't go out of style. And eventually, those values will catch up with you. And you start to hit these walls that I call invisible walls, and start to realize, man, life is a lot tougher than what I thought. And unless you have the wisdom to be able to deal with it, you're going to continue to hit those walls over and over and over. And it's like you have the solution, you've heard the solution, people have talked to you about it, but you refuse to give in to the idea that it's real. You refuse to give in to the idea that, those principles and those values can really make a difference in your situation. So if I was to go back and tell my 20-year-old self what I could do a little differently in that situation, is to listen a little bit more to the words, listen a little bit more to the people that are trying to advise me, the people that are trying to give me some real life experience lessons, trying to give me advice, trying to do those things. I would go back and give them an opportunity to say a little bit more. I would lean in a little bit. I would say, hey, tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that. Can you give me some examples of what that looks like? And do you see me running towards something that, I shouldn't be? Do you see me wasting time and energy? And some of these things are just, you need time to figure that out. And unless you have a amazing mentor that is around you, unless you have people that you're willingly listening to, you won't really pick this up. And so in my 20s, I wish I would have paid attention more to that. The next thing is making sure that you're taking care of yourself in a better way. You know, as we're young, we have young metabolisms. So we're eating a bunch of crap. We're eating hot Cheetos and all those sort of things. And that sort of stuff is just detrimental to, you know, what we're trying to achieve. It's detrimental to our mindsets. It's detrimental to our physical bodies. It's detrimental to, you know, the different things that, or the different chemicals that we're putting in our body creates different reactions in our body. And unless you recognize that and really come to terms with that, you're just kind of putting those things in your mouth, not really worried about it, because you don't directly see something happening every time. It's not like you put a Cheeto in your mouth and you have a physical reaction. However, compounded over time, these things start to pile up on you. You start to gain the weight, you start to get depressed, you start to get anxious, start to have anxiety about things that you're not even, like, why am I anxious about this? Why am I having anxiety around this thing? And a lot of times you don't even equate that to the food that you're eating. You just kind of shrug it off as like, that's just life. It's just problems, just things that are happening. And that's not really the truth, is it? The truth is that we're adding to that equation all the time. And the truth is that we are adding to the fire with kindling in terms of putting all of the crap in our mouths. Man, this is a beautiful view right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Probably not. A little bit there. There you go. And so, understanding that piece of the equation is so important. Number 3 would probably be to close my mouth a little bit more and to listen more than I talk, right? You know, they say that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth because we're supposed to be listening twice as much as we are talking. And I find that to be true nowadays that I'm, you know, 40 years old. I find it to be something that, you know, I try to teach my sons, where you don't want to be reactive to everything. You don't want to be somebody that can't control their tongue. You don't want to be somebody that can't control those inclinations to just clap back really fast. You want to take time, digest information, take it in and allow it to permeate your heart. Allow it to give it consideration. Like, you have to give that thought consideration. Now, I'm not saying that every person that comes to you with a thought, or every person that is trying to give you some sort of criticism or something like that, is right. That's not what I'm saying. Or that they're even wise. What I'm saying is that you got to give yourself an opportunity, because in those moments, you will show up as the wise one. You will show up as a person who is either malleable enough to take the information in, to do something with it, or the person who's just too ignorant to want to listen. I'm going to sit down just for a second. And so, it is freezing. It's like 20 degrees. But if you position yourself to hear the information, to digest the information, to let it permeate your heart, it makes life a lot easier, because you're not constantly fighting, or you're not constantly on defense. You know, when I meet somebody who is always has a rebuttal, always has something to say before you even finish your sentence, you know, you just don't even fight with them for airspace. You just kind of stop talking to that person, because you know what you're going to be met with. You know that you're going to be met with resistance that's really misplaced. You're met with resistance that's immature, and you can't really make the impact that you want to, because they're not receiving it. You're throwing pearls to swines, essentially. Number 4 would be to get my sleep, to get enough sleep. I was talking to my son the other day, and he was like, you know, if I get 3 hours, I can, you know, go for 3 days. And look, he's young, so he's going to feel like that. You know, he feels untouchable right now, which is normal. It's normal to feel untouchable when you're 20 years old. I felt untouchable. But when I got into my mid-20s, and I started to realize that the panic attacks and the anxiety and the stress and the weight gain and everything that I was experiencing was a direct cause of my habits, of my food, of my thoughts, and of my sleep. It was a game changer. I started forcing myself to go to bed early. I started forcing myself to go to bed at a decent hour and to raise up, and to wake up at a certain hour so I can get a workout in. And when I did that, it put me on a schedule that just allowed me to be able to predict how I was going to feel. Like, I knew that if I got 7 to 8 hours of sleep, I would feel phenomenal. I knew that if I burned the midnight oil and I got 3 hours of sleep, I'd feel like trash and my anxiety would be back. And so what it allows you to do is all of the restorative nature of sleep, and I don't want to get deep into that because I'm not like a sleep professional, but I know that there's a lot of great benefits. And you don't have to be a scientist to understand that sleep is important, right? And so if I would have known in my 20s how important sleep was, I would have given it more respect. If I would have known how rest and recovery is, how important that is, I would have given it more respect. I would have taken it more seriously. I would have had a better strategy when it came to that. You know, as you get older, these words like strategic become your best friends. Give me 1 second. I'm going to put some chapstick on, man. It is cold out here. But these words become your best friend. These words become something that you embrace because, you know, you understand how life works a lot more. You understand what things, you know, there's ramifications for things. You understand that, you know, there's better ways of doing things. There's smarter ways of doing things. You know, you're working smarter, not harder. And because of that, that maturity level just skyrockets. That maturity level skyrockets in a way that it couldn't really skyrocket if you were not listening, if you were being ignorant, if you were not getting your sleep, if you weren't putting good things in your body, if you weren't doing these things, man, you wouldn't be able to take leaps and bounds like you are able to do in your 40s. And so these are things that I think that if I was to go back and talk to myself in my 20s, I would probably talk to myself about these things. I'd probably tell myself these things along with a few others, but those are the things that kind of come to mind in regards to my 20s and how ignorant I really was. Now, keep in mind, I wasn't just like an average 20-year-old. I was already a father. I was already somebody who had kids and that was raising my kids alone. Almost from the very beginning, after my kids were born, I had to take custody of them and to start to raise them alone. So it wasn't like I was just out there doing crazy stuff, but these simple things that I was neglecting were the very things that were destroying my life from the inside out. I think lastly, if I was going to put a bonus one in there, is, you know, we all know you are what you eat, but you are what you read, you are what you talk about, you are what you surround yourself with. And so a lot of the friends that I was holding on to in California just weren't the best friends that I should have been around. And the fact of the matter is that I had spent some time in Indianapolis, so I was homesick. So when I got home, I defaulted to the friends that I had when I left. Now you got to remember that when I left, I was a young teenager that was misguided. I was a young teenager that, you know, was getting in trouble. And so those friends weren't the best. And those people in my life at that point in time, I won't say that they were encouraging me to do crazy stuff because I was doing that on my own, but it wasn't the ecosystem that I needed to be in. It wasn't the proper setting that I needed to position myself in for success. Now, if I wanted to just kind of live life and just live the same way and just kind of have a mediocre life, then it's perfect. If I wanted to end up on the streets, perfect. If I wanted to live that prison-style lifestyle, perfect. But I didn't want any of that. So I had to wake up eventually and say, this isn't it. This isn't the crowd that you need to be hanging with. These aren't the people that you need to be associating yourself with. These aren't the people that you need to be talking to and spending all this time, money, and energy with. So anyhow, it's 20 degrees. Those are a handful of things that I wish that I knew in my 20s, or if I can go back and talk to myself in my 20s, I will talk about those things. And there's probably a slew of other ones, so maybe I'll do a second part to this video. But Those are things that I definitely would go back and say, hey, listen, these are the things that we got to focus on, man. These are the things, as simple as they sound, as trivial as they sound, will be the very things that will change your life. Hey, this is Coach C. I want you to live with purpose. I want you to get up every single day. Try harder than you did the day before. I'll see you soon.